probably 4 or 5 months ago. And he explained the statistical process of gathering the data, and I'm fairly convinced that over 100,000 Iraqis have died in this war. He basically said they had to throw Fallujah out of the statistical balance, because if they would have left the Fallujah number in there, it would have skewed the whole thing up to where who knows how many people had died. So
compelled to take action. The Geneva Convention and Torture Treaty and the Torture Treaty place a legally binding obligation on states that have ratified them to exercise universal jurisdiction over persons accused of grave breaches of the Geneva Convention, etc. Amnesty International, USA, Human Rights Watch, Center for Constitutional Rights, the ACLU, and American Bar Association, and Human Rights First have joined in a call for a special prosecutor also. Of course, that's up to, unfortunately, Alberto Gonzalez to appoint. But that's just, I mean, I think this is really pretty remarkable.
Well, this was a last-minute addition, having Harvey come to town. Harvey Tharp is this gentleman's name. Just got to meet him yesterday, I believe.
It's been back a year.
Oh, you've been back a year now, okay.
I've got an email address, harveytharp@hotmail.com, and that's all I got for the moment. So if anyone wants to, I'm with Iraq Veterans Against the War, but we're just a couple hundred really pissed off guys. So I've got this email address, and anyone who wants to email me. For now, I think I'm going to be sending out copies of this speech tonight, and if I, if my message gets out, if it gets heard, and if people are interested in it.
Well, I'm William Wagener. I'm here on the set of On Second Thought, and former Navy Lieutenant Harvey Tharp's with us. Thank you, Mr. Tharp, for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
Do you like being called Mr. Tharp now as opposed to Lieutenant Tharp?
Well, I'm not a lieutenant in the Navy anymore, so just call me Harv.
Okay, you resigned your commission.
That's right.
Got an honorable discharge.
That's right.
Did you worry about whether you'd get an honorable discharge when you told them why you wanted to get out of here?
Absolutely, because I resigned my commission in the Navy because of what I experienced in Iraq and what they were going to ask me to do if I had stayed in the Navy to participate in the war against Iraq again. And if the Navy had not accepted my resignation, I think I probably would have had to just refuse to participate in that mission anymore, and I might be in prison right now.
Is that a scary thought?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Military prisons are not really nice, are they?
No, they're not. No.
I think there's one at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and it's not really a nice place. I actually escorted some people there once who did things in Vietnam they shouldn't have done. I'm a Vietnam veteran. Harvey is a generation later, a veteran of this war they call the Iraq War. Isn't that what they call it, the Iraq War?
Well, they don't give out a medal for being in Iraq. They give out the Global War on Terrorism medal. Even though they stopped using that phrase, they still just give out the Global War on Terrorism medal.
It sort of like sinks into the global one world government, doesn't it?
Well, as far as trying to, what I think they need to do is they need to give people recognition for the fact that they served in Iraq and not try and make a propaganda coup out of it.
And that's what they're doing, isn't it? President Bush is making a propaganda coup by calling it a Global War on Terrorism medal.
Absolutely.
Ooh, scary, scary. Well, Harv's with us, and we've got some questions for it, but I want to take you back. But he spoke very well, still wearing his Desert Navy shirt at the San Luis Obispo County Library in California. We're going to go back to that and let you hear Harv as he addressed a group of about 70 to 100.
You don't support the troops. Anything that Iraq Veterans Against the War does that you were there with, you can say, and I want to get everyone in Iraq Veterans Against the War to say, thank you for coming here. So you can say, thank you for being here for me. So you can say, I talked to this one guy, and he was really, really glad to see 50 people to talk to. Also, it reminds me when I was at my first meeting with Iraq Veterans Against the War, it was the Fayetteville Rally, the 2-year anniversary of the war. And first of all, at the beginning, a woman came up to me and said, welcome to the peace and justice movement, on my first night there. Welcome to, when I introduced myself and said who I was. Welcome. And then, how did you get here? Well, actually, I don't know if I'm actually in the peace and justice movement. I'm actually, what kind of got me here was that, and equally that, and also this tiny little ignored, insignificant faction of the Libertarian Party. So I'm going to dance with the project. Thanks. Thanks. LouRockwell.com. Other libertarians haven't heard about it. Thanks again. But as far as I'm going to try and answer 3 questions here. And I'm not going to try and, dump on the peace and justice movement. Far from it. How did I get here to where I am today? And how did I get out of the military, second of all, being an officer? And what am I going to do now? What's your next move, Harv? Well, let me get to that in a minute. Like I said, email me. I'm going to send out tapes to this. Oh, and one more thing. I gave this speech to my father in Dillsboro, Indiana today on the way over here because it's the first big message speech I've tried to give. I gave one other speech before, and it was just a 20-minute yell. And I'm trying to give some structure to what I want to say, so I gave this speech to my father on the way over here, and he said, "Son, for God's sake, slow down," because half speed, a quarter speed, whatever. Now, I'm not, my father's 60 years old, and he always tells the same story about 4 or 5 times before he, forgets it again. He's pretty sharp, but still. I think I can go a little faster than when I gave it to him, and I only did about 20 minutes. But please, if anybody, if I'm going too fast, just say, slow down, and I'll slow down. Okay, so I got 3 questions I'm going to answer. How did I get here today? How did they let me out? And what's your next move, Harv? And let me start with that, foreshadow that what's your next move by giving you a mental image of where are we in the peace, where I'm with you. I am the libertarians too. But where are we in the fight against the war machine right now? Okay, you walk in here today, and up on the stage, there's a chessboard, an enormous chessboard. And over here on one side, the right side of the chessboard, there are these 4 or 5 chess experts, and they're just smiling and talking amongst themselves. And the rules are that they get, they make a move, and they wait 30 minutes, and then they get to make another move. And there's all these other people here. There's about 1/3 of the crowd is in their corner, totally in their corner, and smiling and laughing and everything else at every move they make. And then 2/3, some people aren't paying attention, some people are are on one side or on that side. Every once in a while, someone will realize a game is being played, and they'll try and make a move, or they'll make a move. But these guys, these few people, are making almost all the moves. And if you don't make a move, your time runs out, they make another one. Your time runs out, they make another one. And I'll come back to this, but the most famous speech, the most famous sum up of what the war party is doing right now was one source, anonymous source in the administration, saying, "You reporters and you people on the other side, you don't get it. We are creating our own reality right now. Right here, right now, we create our own reality. We make a move and you study it. You study it judiciously, as you will. We're already making another move. And while you study that, we'll make another one because we're an empire and that's what we do now. We create our own reality." Now, first of all, if you're an empire, guys, empires always fall. And through history, they seem to fall sooner and sooner and sooner after they reach their apex. So you might want to think about that, but they're not going to think about that. But I will tell you, they are making their own reality. They're standing here, and there's the chessboard, and they're making their moves, and no one is on the other side making a move. There are a few people, and there's one person who made a move that made me think, okay, Harv, if you were going to make one move, because I'm not going to beat up the global peace and justice movement here tonight, but I don't know if you've heard Scott Ritter's last speech to the global peace and justice movement, and he says, you guys failed. You failed against Bush, you failed against Iraq, you failed against Bush's re-election, you're failing to get the war over, and by the way, we've already started our next war with Iran. We've already started our next war against Iran, and you have failed to stop that. Didn't actually say anything for what you all need to do, and let me make sure I'm taping. I'm taping. You might get a copy tonight if I don't erase it. Well, okay, he says you've already failed, but did he give us a move? No. Okay, mental image thing to think about, what I've been thinking about. Oh, it's almost too late, isn't it? But if we could make one move and make it count, what would it be? All right. Boy, I'd better come up with something good, huh? with that kind of introduction. But how did I get here? Well, I was in Iraq. And what was so different about Iraq that I ended up here? Well, I was abandoned in Iraq. And I don't want to complain because anyone who was outside the wire in Iraq would probably had it a little better than me at least. Anyone who was outside the wire doing anything on the ground in Iraq had it in some ways a hell of a lot better than me, especially because I came back. Now, but at the same time, abandoned, I mean I was stationed at a base. I had some people I talked to about my job, but I had no chain of command, and I had no unit. I was basically doing my job on my own. And what did I do? And again, if I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down. It tends to come out pretty fast. I was a judge advocate in Hawaii. I was the command JAG for a unit in Hawaii that did intelligence, National Security Agency. Now, I didn't really do any National Security Agency stuff, don't have the secrets to not be able to tell you because I was just, did the legal work, the court martials, whatever. But I'm just doing that in Hawaii. Iraq War comes up and I'm like, boy, this looks like a really stupid idea. What the hell are they about to do? And the war comes up, but it doesn't involve me. And you have to take the Arabic test. Everyone who'd ever studied Arabic before, which it just so happens, before I went in the Navy, before I went to law school, I was in the Air Force. And my job from 93 to 97 was military intelligence, and I went to Arabic school, and I hadn't studied Arabic in like, 5 years. So, okay, I'll take the test. Fine, whatever. This doesn't concern me. And I'm taking the test, and as soon as I get the test,
Well, that was Harvey Tharp. And if you caught the first part of that, which we live streamed here from the studio, you saw a younger version of me 14 years ago. And why is that relevant today? Because Harvey Tharp resigned his commission because he realized the war we were fighting in Iraq was not for the reasons the government and ABC and CBS and BBC and all of those corporate television media channels were telling you. The real reason had to do with something Harvey couldn't make sense of until after he got out. And I have tried to keep track with Harvey Tharp over the years, and he's just sort of wanted to fade away. What you see behind me is Irwin Schiff, who was prosecuted and I would say murdered by our federal government in a federal prison, going blind, going deaf, for publishing this book, a book that will convince you. The book I have right here, it's called The Federal Mafia by Irwin Schiff. And I have the first, second, and third editions of it. You should read this book, The Federal Mafia by Irwin Schiff. Even though he's long dead, the issues haven't changed. Just as recently you saw President Trump, just days ago, weeks ago maybe, depending when you're watching this, pull troops out of Syria, pull troops away from where our troops could be injured or killed. And immediately you saw a whole whoop-de-doo by the Democratic Party and operatives for the bank gangsters saying, oh, how terrible, we're abandoning their... If you go back to the Constitution, which very few people do anymore, they warned us about foreign wars. The whole point was to keep us out of foreign wars. They realized bankers made huge amount of wealth on these foreign wars. And their goal was to get us out of foreign wars, where the entire North Atlantic Ocean, separating us from Europe and all their nonstop, endless wars, and all of the Pacific, which they didn't realize in 1776, but they had a clue there was something out there big and wet called the Pacific Ocean, separating us from China and Japan and all those things out there that could lead to war. God had blessed America. And what does all this have to do with November 2nd? It has a lot to do with it. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, a Democrat who I did not like at the time, because I was not a Democrat, but looking back, he looks more conservative than the Republicans, with the exception of Donald Trump and a very few other Republicans. He looks far more conservative looking back. He wanted to put us on the moon by the end of the 1960s, and that happened. He wanted to get us out of the Vietnam War, and that didn't quite happen. That's the main reason J. Edgar Hoover, that gay, wacko, cross-dressing director of the FBI, whose name should be off the FBI building, but to the FBI's shame, and to the shame of Lois Capps, our former congresswoman, and to the shame of Salud Carbajal, our current congressman here in Santa Barbara, and all the other congressmen, Hoover's name is still on the FBI, even though we now know he was blackmailing all of Congress so he could hold that position as FBI director longer than anybody else ever has or probably ever will. So moving on, because today is Thursday the 21st, tomorrow is not only my birthday, it's the anniversary of the planned execution and murder, not by some Cuban communist, not by Khrushchev, the leader of the bad old USSR, which we now just call Russia, but by people at the very, very top of the American government. The very top. J. Edgar Hoover, the gay cross-dressing director of the FBI. George Herbert Walker Bush, who was a low-level agent of the CIA and illegally held a congressional seat while he was still intimately connected with the CIA. You can't be in two different branches of the government at the same time. Bush Sr., George Herbert Walker Bush, got away with it. And he got away with orchestrating the murder of the president, who had embarrassed the CIA and some other federal agencies by saying, we're not going to send that many troops, we're not going to send that many people into Cuba. Wow. And he also said, I am going to scatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, while people sitting there in his cabinet reported that directly, immediately, ladies and gentlemen, immediately, to creepos in the Central Intelligence Agency who actually do not work for the best interests of we the people. They actually work for the international bankers to run up the national debt. And if that Vietnam War ended at the beginning of Kennedy's second term, the national debt wouldn't have gone up so fast. We wouldn't have had to take the silver out of our coins. We wouldn't have had to go off the gold standard completely. And we wouldn't have the rapid, uncontrolled inflation controlled by a handful of bank gangsters, mostly located in Europe, but some of them in New York City. And all the little puppets, like the guy who runs Chase. What's his name? Not Craigman. Jamie Dimon. The only guy to survive the crash of 08, 09. And still very powerful in New York and Wall Street. Jamie Dimon. He was just on one of the network TV shows explaining why he's really a good guy. Well, I have some grave reservations about that. In my opinion, he and Greg Diamond, who I think's name appears on those forged papers of Greg Diamond, D-I-M-O-N-D, appears on Cindy Brown's forged documents where it says she should check it off, white woman. Cindy Brown is clearly a highly intelligent black woman who was on the 1988 Olympic team. And whoever forged those documents, maybe Polly One did down at McCarthy Holtis in San Diego. Maybe it was forged somewhere else. Turns out I've now identified over 9 places where forged documents are happening. And to my knowledge, to this day, ladies and gentlemen, the FBI, having been given notice by Jack Sooty, a retired police officer, who did his own video of Polly One and identified her, to the FBI in San Diego, they still have not made any arrests. Gee, how does this connect to JFK's assassination? It's all about running up the national debt and transferring wealth from hardworking Americans, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or independents, or they don't even vote, taking their homes and giving it to the elite. Absolute criminal activity in our face, and it's being ignored. Jack Kennedy, despite all the womanizing he did, is still highly respected for getting us a goal to be the first to put a man on the moon and get them back alive. Don't forget the second part, get them back alive. That was Jack Kennedy setting that goal. Yeah, NASA, thousands of engineers at NASA did their best, and they were very good at what they did. But it was Jack Kennedy who set that goal. Now, whether you think that was a good goal or a bad goal, it proved that Americans' technology, the capitalist system, even with all its corruption, was better than the United Socialist Soviet Republic, the USSR, what we used to call Russia, back in the bad old days of the Cold War, which sometimes came very close to becoming a hot war. And I think Kennedy made the right decision not to escalate the Cuban cabal of insanity, where people like George Herbert Walker Bush were urging us to plow into the war. The CIA was horrifically angry, and then to hear Kennedy in a private cabinet meeting say, I'm going to scatter the CIA to 1,000 pieces. That's really drastic language for a sitting president, and he had good cause. I don't think people today even begin to understand how the depths of what Kennedy understood. They had to assassinate him. They used J. Edgar Hoover, that cross-dressing gay wacko who blackmailed all the congressmen. They used George Herbert Walker Bush. They used Big Oil. And they used, now remember, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was a Democrat. His running mate was Lyndon Baines Johnson, and Kennedy was already talking on the phone on a secure private line to his brother Robert Kennedy, who was the Attorney General, one of the youngest Attorney Generals America's ever had, and brother to Jack, on a secure line. We've got to get rid of LBJ. Now, what the historians don't tell you, and you're not going to hear this from any other channel, at that same time, on November, that week of the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, exactly on the 21st, there was a big meeting at LBJ's ranch with powerful people there from the CIA, from the FBI, from Big Oil, and more people, later identified by the maids that were serving drinks and providing, snacks. Exactly right now, at this time that we're airing this show here in California, that's when they were gathering at LBJ Ranch. Exactly on November 21st. And LBJ, better known to those of you who don't recognize that because you're too young, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Vice President of the United States at that time, had a secret meeting, came out and said, well, everything is going to go just fine. No worries. A week before that, his mistress, Brown, her name was Brown, who had a son that looked a spitting image of LBJ when LBJ was young, who mysteriously had to die young. We're not going to go into Brown's son's death, but he looked very much like LBJ. She went on TV later and on film and said, yeah, a week before the assassination, I was sleeping in bed and with LBJ, and he get up and he pounded his chest and said, next week I will be president. How many things like this do you have to have written in books that you can read, that you can find? The books are out there. But you don't see them promoted on Fox by Tucker or Sean Hannity. You certainly don't see them on the Don Lyman, that screwball on CNN. Those are my words, my opinion. He's a complete screwball. I mean, he pushed the Russiagate and Russiagate. Oh yeah, we got Trump, and it all turned out to be the real Russian gate was the Democratic National Committee had people who paid for the dossier that was completely fake, then submitted to the secret court to get warrants and permission to spy on the Trump campaign. Now this is as bad as it gets, and it's exactly what the Founding Fathers wanted to never see happen. Yet there it happened. In our time, it happened. And the Democratic Party cannot escape their culpability. Mueller should be in prison. He should have been indicted, put on trial, and convicted because he knew this dossier had issues. When you go to that secret court that most of us cannot access, nobody's in the gallery, and you present something as factual, knowing an ex-British secret spy, regardless if he got paid through the Ukraine or wherever, how, created a fake document to submit, and you knew that, and you submitted it to these justices, and they have to give the FBI some credibility and say, well, the FBI is saying this and that, I guess we better approve their warrants and their sneak and seek searches. America, if we don't put Mueller and those other people that collaborated with him in prison, then Jack Kennedy died for nothing, Robert Kennedy was murdered for nothing, and the real criminals, the swamp, will win. I don't believe Trump can get rid of the swamp, even in 2 terms. Don't believe it's possible, because what is the swamp? It's the crooks in the FBI, the bad guys in the CIA that shake hands and do business with the mafia to assassinate people we don't like, or the CIA doesn't like, so that we can keep wars going, endless wars, to use George W. Bush's words. And no matter who, whether it's Al-Qaeda or whoever, whatever label they give them, they will find another enemy so we can keep running up the national debt when we need to do what Kennedy wanted to do. He was going to start issuing silver dollars again, and he gave the executive order. Unfortunately, he was assassinated. The executive order was carried out. They actually did make a 1964 silver dollar, and then they didn't let it go into circulation. They melted them all down again. But the executive order was carried out after Kennedy was dead and buried. And LBJ had to play this game. The game was this. Oh, we're in a terrible time, and I need Jackie Kennedy to come up to the front of Air Force One while I'm sworn in so the American people can see that there's a smooth transition and we can deal with the communists. It wasn't communists at all. It was him. It was Lyndon Baines Johnson, along with Hoover and the Bush cabal and a whole bunch of other actors in the background arranging. And how did they just happen to have a federal judge waiting to go to Air Force One? How do you make that happen when supposedly all this was spontaneous? Here's a fact. I'm not talking about theories. I'm talking about facts. Under the state of Texas state law, if someone is murdered, which Jack Kennedy clearly was, that body cannot be removed from the county or the state until an autopsy has been performed. And we all know the body was ripped away from the county coroner, who was objecting as federal agents were saying, we're taking this body, and they got their gun out and said, we're taking it now. And there's witnesses to that. So you have federal officers, so-called officers, but the law is, if you're breaking the law and wearing a badge, you're no longer an officer. They were never arrested. They got away with stealing Jack Kennedy's corpse, and it should have been put in the cargo bay. That would have been the easy thing to do. Air Force One had a cargo bay that could have opened up, they could have put the casket in there, sealed it up, and nobody would have been to get near it until it landed at Washington, D.C. But check this fact out. Check it out yourself. Don't take my word for it. Under Texas law, as in many states, you cannot take a victim of murder or suspected victim of murder until the autopsy has been done. And it was never done in the city of Dallas, Texas, where it should have been done. Now that's a fact. This is not theory. Now, I'm going to go to the next step. Lbj had a history, and it's partially documented in this book called Lbj the Mastermind of the Assassination of the JFK assassination. But he was an integral part. This book is written by Philip F. Nelson. And there's many good chunks of information in this book. Even though it's, I don't know, a decade old, it's published by Skyhorse, a little-known publisher. Now, why didn't Simon & Schuster publish it? That's what you should be asking. Why did Simon & Schuster not publish this book? Why was it not on CBS Morning Show and the NBC and MSNBC? Why was this not seen everywhere? Why was this book not seen? This book, with the brooding eyes of Lbj, should have been on every major television network. It was not. Instead, this obscure publisher published this in 2011. I highly recommend you read this book. It's stuffed full of facts, and it's got a long bibliography telling you where the facts come from. There are other books that are somewhat worth mentioning. There's The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop. There's a lot of books about the Kennedy, but the one I think this is by Murray Rothbard, it's called For a New Liberty. The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffith is an amazing book. I don't have time to go into all of it, but it's an amazing book. And when you begin to understand, like chapter 16, the creature comes to America. These books deserve to be read. There are a lot of books, including a Supreme Court justice, I think from the state of Michigan, and she died also very quickly after her book came out, and that's a whole show. This book, John F. Kennedy, by Joyce Milton, a biography. Now, I'm not saying every fact in these books are absolutely the truth, that there is no skewing of the facts. I'm not saying that. I'm saying do your own research. Because if they could assassinate John F. Kennedy as they assassinated Lincoln and get away with it, there's no reason except one. They couldn't assassinate President Donald Trump. Just to mention in passing, Jury Suris by Pamela and Will Gaston, both who are dead now. And I got this directly from Will Gaston. Pamela was already dead when I went to interview him. It's a great book about how CPS abuses children while all the time claiming to protect children. Here's a book, To Harass Our People, the IRS and Government Abuse of Power by Congressman George Hansen. I believe he's dead now. So there's plenty of stuff for you to research, and YouTube and the internet makes it relatively easy. But if we, the people, spend our time watching Dancing with Stars and America's Got Talent or some other country's got talent, and I like the recreational TV too, but we need to know for a fact, not because William Wagener said so, but you need to do your own research and know for a fact that we've been lied to. And it's really blatant if you watch CNN almost every night during the so-called hearing on impeachment. It's not an impeachment. There's no articles of impeachment. This is just browbeating. They're doing it so badly, I wonder if somebody from Trump's team isn't orchestrating and pulling Adam Schiff like a puppet. It's so bad. Hearsay based on hearsay that I think I heard someone say, and then I read the transcript days later, but we're on the call. Did you hear, hey, I won't give you the Javelin missiles until you investigate Hunter Trump? No, you didn't hear that. Hunter Biden. And by the way, why aren't we investigating? Why isn't Adam Schiff not investigating why Bizma or Blizma, whatever the corporation in Ukraine is called, why are they paying Biden's son $1 million to sit on the board of directors of an energy company he knows nothing about? Well, I'll tell you what, Ukraine, why don't you appoint William Wagener? I'll sit on the board of directors. You pay my flight over there, and I'll sit there, and I have some background in environmental science, should be useful, and I'll settle for $500,000. And Ukraine, you can save yourself $500,000. Don't waste it on Hunter Biden. He knows nothing about, he doesn't even know anything about environmental science. God bless us. How could America survive with almost all the media selling you crap? And I got to say this, although I like the libertarian stance that Tucker has taken on Fox Channel lately, and I like the libertarian stance Donald Trump has taken to pull troops out of Syria, to try to disengage so we don't have more dead Americans. We should have our military on our borders stopping Latin American criminals from bringing drugs into America. That's where our troops should be, not trying to defend somebody else's oil field. It's not even our oil. Russia is no longer our Cold War enemy. Even if Vladimir Putin raised as a KGB agent in the Cold War era, even if he thinks we're enemies, we're not. If Russia launched every missile they had from every submarine and every land base at the United States right now, probably not more than 1 in 10 would hit anywhere in the United States, would be knocked out from our military software we've got circling the planet. And even those that hit somewhere probably wouldn't hit a major population area. And then the devastation to Moscow, Leningrad, St. Petersburg would be devastating. There would be no Russia. And when Trump, rattles his little sword about North Korea, I just have to laugh. But nevertheless, I think Trump is on a mission impossible. There has been decades and decades, and even Eisenhower back in the 50s warned us about the military industrial complex Eisenhower, who was such a popular president, both the Democratic Party tried to recruit him and the Republican. Both major parties tried to get Eisenhower to run as their presidential candidate. And after he won, you know, he had, except for his 10% or general, whatever his name was, that was getting kickbacks, that was about the worst embarrassment in the Eisenhower administration. Beloved by all America. And since those days, and even before those days, starting around 1946, when the Office of Special Operations got transitioned into the secret CIA that's going to protect America from things we can't understand. That's all crap. They get us involved in wars. That ambassador that was murdered while Hillary was running the State Department, that ambassador, Stevens I think was his name, was about to come back to America and explain exactly who, where, how had transferred missiles, surface-to-air missiles from the United States into the hands of Al-Qaeda-connected terrorist groups. And tens of thousands of those missiles were transferred. He was going to come back because he couldn't get anybody in the State Department to listen. What happened? All of a sudden, Hillary's watch is on, and they withdraw the security. So there's only 2 security guards defending our embassy in Libya. 2! And they're on their secret thing, sending secret messages to America saying, we need more support here. We don't have enough defense. And then when the instigated riots started to attack our embassy in Libya, 3 or 4 blocks away, there was a secret, unknown to anybody local, SEAL team that could have rescued them. Who told them to stand down? Was that Hillary Clinton herself? Is that why she had to make 3,000 or 30,000 emails disappear? Set her computer hard drives on fire one day because she was afraid somebody was going to come in and grab the evidence that could have put her in prison for life, if not put her up for high treason. The only reason Trump is alive today is because he developed his own security force over the last 20 years. And when he took office, he made sure his security service got Secret Service clearance, and they're the same ones still protecting him. That's why he's alive. Otherwise, he would be dead and buried already. There wouldn't be all this never Trump stuff. There'd be, oh, it's too bad. Let's go to the funeral of President Trump. Whether I'm a Democrat or Republican, we'll pretend to care. He'd be dead already. But he has his own guys that he actually can trust. That's why he's alive. Thumbs up for you, President Trump. I just wish you would now grant a full pardon to Dr. Elaine Brown, a dentist who harmed nobody, and Ed Brown, her husband, who did no physical damage to anybody. Now in their late 70s, she's in a prison, on a Navy base, women's prison down in Texas. He's, I think, if he's still alive, on a prison somewhere near Washington, D.C. And they've harmed nobody. And yet we have murderers who have been convicted of murder and walked away. Who? The guy that murdered people for Lyndon Baines Johnson was put on trial, and you can research this, found guilty. And the judge, unbelievably, obviously was in LBJ's pocket. That judge gave the convicted murderer, and I'm talking about first-degree premeditated murder, he walked out of the courthouse right along with the jury that convicted him. That's the kind of criminal power Lyndon Baines Johnson used. And killing Jack Kennedy was just the final step. He also, I believe, based on books I've read, and informants whose testimony have not yet appeared in a book, that Lyndon Baines Johnson had his own sister murdered. This Democrat vice president had his own sister murdered on Christmas or Christmas Eve at the ranch and buried without an autopsy, contrary to Texas law. So when they stole Jack Kennedy out of Texas, it wasn't the first time someone was murdered in Texas and got no autopsy. Then there's the agricultural agent who shot himself in the back twice with a shotgun and then tied his head up to the exhaust pipe of his own car with plastic wrapped around. I mean, that's a lot of effort to kill yourself. No, these were murders. Then there's the Billy Saw Estes, and here's what Democrats don't want to hear about this. Oh, that was half a century ago. We don't want to talk about that. Well, you should, because the same crime that happened a half century ago is still being run by the same criminal organizations. The Billy Saw Estes case. But what most people don't know, that there was a Senate Select Subcommittee that was about to indict none other than Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson the week after Kennedy was assassinated, November 22nd, 1963. Hello? Something's really wrong there. And all of a sudden, there was no more talk about indicting the vice president, which Jack Kennedy actually wanted, and Robert Kennedy was leaking information to the subcommittee saying, get LBJ, get him under pressure. So LBJ and Hoover, they got rid of Jack. Then when Robert Kennedy ran, and he was here in California at the now demolished Ambassador Hotel on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, and I've been right there in that kitchen where he was shot to death, they killed Robert Kennedy. And I believe the man they put in prison for the murder of Robert Kennedy is not the man who killed him. The real murderer was a government agent who got out the fire escape and back door and was gone. And anybody that tried to counter or bring that up was silenced. Just like when Jack was killed, federal agents went out on that field at Dealey Plaza, corralled people, took them to an office and said, you will shut your mouth, we'll tell you when you can talk. And they held people prisoner for hours until they agreed to shut their mouth. A doctor and a teacher have written books about it now, but nobody reads those books. Simon & Schuster isn't promoting those books. You have to go to Sky Horse Publishing to get some real stuff. So I should also mention, again, The Creature from Jekyll Island by Edward Griffith. So when you see the media talking to him now, and they're going to talk, oh, you know, it's so sad, Jack Kennedy was killed, look at this Jackie. Notice his head goes back, not forward. Anybody that knows a little science knows this thing called the conservation of energy. If he was shot 3 times from the back, hit even once from the book depository in Dealey Plaza, which is a total farce, didn't happen that way. But if it was, his head would have gone forward. In fact, his head went back and to the left, because the real assassin, there were actually 2. There was one shooting from the overpass they drove under later, and there was one down in the gutter. And the one in the gutter shot up and hit him, blew a big chunk of his head off. And on the flight back from Dallas, they had this horrible person who'd done work for the mob, done work for Angleton, who's with the CIA. And Angleton used several other names besides. He literally took Officer Tibbetts, who had been shot about the same time Kennedy was, because Officer Tibbetts of the Dallas Police Department was often said, and they joked a lot about it around the Dallas Police Department, oh, here comes Kennedy. It was Officer Tibbetts. He looked a lot like Kennedy. So they switched the bodies, and when they got the bodies were switched. And you say, well, how can they switch? Jackie never left the coffin. Well, she did for about 3 minutes when they were swearing in LBJ. And he wouldn't agree to be sworn in until she left the casket and came up to that part of the plane. When that happened, they switched the caskets, or switched the bodies in the caskets. And that's probably, now this is not known fact, but there's plenty of people saying this that can't get a book published. They switched the bodies, Officer Tibbets went in, Kennedy went out. Then they took and they changed the way the body, the head looked, so it'd be consistent with shots from behind, trying to cover up their trail. It didn't work. The truth has come out anyway, at least pieces of it. And I still think we still don't know all the truth. There's a lot yet to be known. And there was a commission in the 80s, I believe, that tried to bring up more truth. And that didn't go well for those people who were on that committee when it came re-election time. So with that, I want to take you on to yeah, let's I want to show you something called loose change. And I'm going to hand it to my ever-faithful Stephen. And we're going to look at loose change, second edition. Okay? This was done by 3 young guys. I think 2 of them were out of San Diego. One was named Rowe, I believe. And for publishing this, over 1 million people saw it before I ever heard of it. Then we had them up here on our live show, 2 of them anyway. But I think it was Rowe was later captured by some federal government or military and held prisoner at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, until he agreed to make a statement that maybe he didn't get the story right. But they kept him locked up in solitary until he made that statement. Are we living in America, the home of the free and the land of the brave? Or has this become Nazi Germany, run by the bankers, for the bankers, profit? And if you don't know this yet, I need to tell you now. Go search it. The Federal Reserve Bank is not federal, does not belong to any branch of government. It has no reserves. And it isn't a bank in the traditional system of somebody that takes your deposit, keeps it, your gold and silver in a vault, and then lends it out to others. It's not any of those things. It's a private, for-profit corporation owned by bank gangsters. And I think Donald Trump wants to abolish them. But they got him busy fighting Russiagate and then, fighting this. It'd be a good thing if we abolished and went back to gold and silver. Then they couldn't bribe people with money created out of thin air. If they're going to bribe you, they'd have to go get some real gold and real silver and stick it in your pocket. It will be a great thing for America to go back to the Constitution that states no state shall coin anything except gold and silver. It doesn't say copper clad. It says gold and silver. And it didn't even conceive at the time the Constitution was adopted that the federal government would ever be allowed to coin anything. It was up to the states. Now they put people in jail for making gold and silver coins that look like silver dollars, that have the right weight of silver or the right weight of gold. Everything our founding fathers fought for pretty much died on November 22nd, 1963. And what was left was killed on 9/11. And you still haven't been told the whole truth. There's a Canadian guy who did a very good documentary, but here's a little bit of loose change. I think it's worth your time. These guys did a marvelous job. Marvelous job. They went to the place where the plane theoretically flew over, talked to 2 police officers there. They also talked to the guy who had the car positioned for stage photos to make it look like a plane flew there and damaged his car. Except there's no scratches on his car from the falling pole that was clipped, and didn't break his windows, didn't even scratch the paint on his car. It's just positioned there near the Pentagon. And this was done in broad daylight. how do you pull this off in broad daylight? That's what you should be asking. But if you search the internet, you will find a lot of things there that you won't find told on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News, or CNN, especially not CNN. And that's another thing. When I was a young guy, like 50-some years ago, just back from Vietnam, the media was not as adversarial, taking a position. Now, except for Fox, and I don't even completely trust Fox, because they said they were going to bring us more information on the Bundy cowboy standoff in Nevada, and they gave us a little stuff, and they said, tomorrow we'll have more information. Next day, nothing. They went to zero. They went from some things that had just happened to zero. So I can't say many good things about CBS. Here's copy 2 of Loose Change, 2nd edition. But what's really screwy to me is that none of this is reported to you. There is so much happening. And we just barely heard about Congressman Chris from New York, just east of Buffalo, just resigned because he did some violation of insider trading law. Told his son or son-in-law or somebody, hey, the tests on this drug were bad, the stock's gonna collapse, and they saved themselves $700,000. We had to give up, and he was a Republican. He had to give up his congressional seat. Just last month, I guess, he publicly resigned in Congress. We're not hearing much about that. We should have heard a lot about that, because that happens a lot. There was also another congressman from the San Diego area that got in trouble, and he went to jail. There was also a Democrat congressman from Chicago, had a long Polish name, I forget what it was. He went to jail. Lots of congressmen have gone to jail. You would think you would want to have committee hearings on that, Adam Schiff, not trying to trump up false charges for impeachment of Donald Trump, who's doing a great job with the economy, in spite of all the negative people saying, oh, we're about to hit a depression, we're about to have a big downturn, and yet things keep growing, more job growth, and they keep saying bad things about him. But let's take a look at Loose Change.
The plane flew a total of 16
You didn't
hours
see
and
this on
22
corporate
minutes,
media.
including 10 takeoffs, 69 approaches,
I'm
and
William
13
Wagener. Here we
landings.
go.
August 1997. The cover of FEMA's Emergency Response to Terrorism depicts the World Trade Center in crosshairs. February 28th, 1998. The Global Hawk, Raytheon's unmanned aircraft vehicle, completes its first flight over Edwards Air Force Base in California at an altitude of 32,000 feet, cruising altitude for a commercial jetliner. 1999. NORAD begins conducting exercises in which hijacked airliners are flown into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. June 2000. The Department of Justice releases a terrorism manual with the World Trade Center in crosshairs. September 2000. The Project for a New American Century, a neo-conservative think tank whose members include Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Jeb Bush, and Paul Wolfowitz, releases their report entitled Rebuilding America's Defenses. In it, they declare that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. October 24th, 2000. The Pentagon conducts the first of 2 training exercises called Moscow, which simulate a Boeing 757 crashing into the building. Charles Burlingame, an ex-Navy F-4 pilot who worked in the Pentagon, participates in this exercise before retiring to take a job at American Airlines, where, less than a year later, his Boeing 757 allegedly crashes into the building. April 2001. NORAD plans an exercise in which a plane is flown into the Pentagon, but is rejected as too unrealistic. June 2001. The Department of Defense initiates new instructions for military intervention in the case of a hijacking. It states that for all non-immediate responses, the Department of Defense must get permission directly from the Secretary of Defense. Attorney General John Ashcroft begins flying on chartered jets for the remainder of his term due to a threat assessment by the FBI. July 4th, 2001. Osama bin Laden, wanted by the United States since 1998, receives medical attention at the American hospital in Dubai, where he is visited by a local chief of the CIA. July 24th, 2001. Larry A. Silverstein, who already owned World Trade Center 7, signs a $3.2 billion 99-year lease on the entire World Trade Center complex 6 weeks before 9/11. Included in the lease is a $3.5 billion insurance policy, specifically covering acts of terrorism. September 6, 2001, 3,150 put options are placed on United Airlines stock. A put option is a bet that a stock will fall. That day, put options were more than 4 times its daily average. Bomb-sniffing dogs are pulled from the World Trade Center, and security guards end 2 weeks of 12-hour shifts. September 7th, 2001. 27,294 put options are placed on Boeing stock, more than 5 times the daily average. September 10th, 2001. 4,516 put options are placed on American Airlines, almost 11 times its daily average. Newsweek reports that a number of top Pentagon brass canceled their flight plans for the next morning. San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown receives a phone call warning him not to fly the next morning. Pacifica Radio later reveals that this phone call came directly from National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. And in Pakistan, at a military hospital, all of the urologists are replaced by a special team in order to host their guest of honor, Osama bin Laden, who is carefully escorted inside to be watched carefully and looked after. September 11th, 2001. The National Reconnaissance Office in Chantilly, Virginia, is preparing for an exercise in which a small corporate jet crashes into their building. NORAD is in the middle of a number of military exercises. The first, Vigilant Guardian, is described as an exercise that would pose an imaginary crisis to North American air defense outposts nationwide. The second, Northern Vigilance, moved fighter jets to Canada and Alaska to fight off an imaginary Russian fleet. 3 F-16s from Washington, D.C.'s National Guard at Andrews Air Force Base, 15 miles from the Pentagon, are flown 180 nautical miles away for a training mission in North Carolina. This left 14 fighter jets to protect the entire United States.
Hi, Boston Center, Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need you guys we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test. Do we want to think about scrambling aircraft? Oh, God, I don't know. That's a decision somebody's going to have to make probably in the next 10 minutes. Everybody just left the room.
The first question I have is basically to get from you a sense of how you would rate the American media in their coverage of the events of the attack last September.
Well, let's see. Shamefully is a word that comes to mind.
This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
But overall, the American journalism was cowed and intimidated by this massive flag-sucking, this patriotic orgy. If you criticize the president, it's unpatriotic and there's something wrong with you, you may be a terrorist.
So in that sense, Hunter S. Thompson, there's not enough room for dissenting voices?
Well, there's plenty of room. There's just not enough people are willing to take the risk.
Jim, I don't know whether we've confirmed that this was an aircraft, or to be more specific, some people said they thought they saw a missile.
There was definitely a blue logo. It was like a circular logo on the front of the plane. It definitely did not look like a commercial plane. I didn't see any windows on the side.
Mark, if what you say is true, those could be cargo planes. You said you didn't see any windows in the side?
I didn't see any windows on the side. It was not a normal flight that I've ever seen at an airport. It was a plane that had a blue logo on the front, and it did not look like it belonged in this area.
It's just sort of a herd mentality, a lemming-like mentality. If you don't go with the flow, you're anti-American and therefore a suspect.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
You sort of wonder when something like that happens, well, who stands to benefit? You know, who had the opportunity and the motive? You just kind of look at these basic things. I don't assume that I know the truth about what went on that day. And, yeah, I just look around and looking for, well, who had motive, who had the opportunity, who had the equipment, who had the will. I spent enough time on the inside of, well, the White House and campaigns, and I've done enough for the people who do these things to know that the public version of the news, what an event, is never really what happened. And these people, I think, are willing to take that even further.
It seems a very long bow to me, but are you sort of suggesting that this worked in the favour of the Bush administration?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
(9:38), Arlington, Virginia. Hani Hanyor allegedly executes a 330-degree turn at 530 miles per hour, descending 7,000 feet in 2.5 minutes to crash American Airlines Flight 77 into the ground floor of the Pentagon. Its final approach took it directly across Interstate 395. Knocking light poles out of the ground and bouncing off of the lawn before impact. First, let's meet Hani Hanyor. Hanyor had come to Freeway Airport in Bowie, Maryland 1 month earlier seeking to rent a small plane. However, when Hanyor went on 3 test runs in the second week of August, he had trouble controlling and landing a single-engine Cessna 172.
Well, my name is Marcel Bernard, and I'm the chief flight instructor here at Freeway. Hani Hanyor, well, basically what happened with him is he showed up at the airport and wanted to get checked out in the aircraft. See, he was already certified. He didn't come to us for flight training.
Yeah, he already had a pilot's license.
He had already earned his private instrument commercial at a school in Arizona, and I don't remember the name of the school, but he already had certificates in hand. And We sometimes occasionally have pilots that come to us that don't want flight training but just want to rent our aircraft.
Which is the case of Hani Heiner.
This was the case with Hani. He wanted to get checked out, as we call it, to rent our aircraft. And our insurance requires that he flies with one of our instructors to be found competent to rent. And that was the process that he was going through. The consensus was that he was very quiet, average or below average piloting skills. English was very poor. So I don't know where to. That's about the best description I can give you for his demeanor at that time. Very, uneventful from our perspective.
Regardless, air traffic controllers at Dulles International Airport that were tracking Flight 77 all thought that it was a military plane. Second, the light poles. On November 22, 2004, a private jet en route to Houston to pick up George Bush Sr. clipped a single light pole and crashed a minute away from landing at Houston's Hobby Airport. The wing ripped off upon impact, scattering debris over 100 yards. And yet, Flight 77 managed to tear 5 light poles completely out of the ground without damaging either the wings or the light poles themselves. Instead, they seem to have just popped out of the ground. Third, you only have to look at the photos from that day to realize that whatever hit the Pentagon did not bounce off the lawn. If Flight 77 had crash landed and skidded into the Pentagon, it would have looked like this.
Yeah, that's called Loose Change, second edition. And I really recommend you go on the internet, buy your own copy, and watch the whole thing. Splendid job done by some very young guys that never did anything close to this before. Credit to Roe and his buddies that did that. Belongs to them. I did not produce or finance second edition of Loose Change. It's really worth seeing. When you see those buildings collapse and you find out that a professor of chemistry tested the dust and said there's huge amounts of an explosive that only the military can get their hands on. And then you see those total collapse almost in free fall speed. You know that whether planes hit the Twin Towers or not, that's not what caused it to collapse. And I have interviewed the woman at the Pentagon whose baby survived with injuries when she turned on her computer and kaboom, everything blew up. She was told to come in even when she said, I don't have an ID for my baby yet. They said, don't worry about it, get in here. And then her supervisor walked away to the safe side of the Pentagon while she put her baby down and got ready. When she pushed the button, turned on her computer, kaboom. Then there's the witnesses say, I saw no plane fly into the Pentagon. I saw something fly over the Pentagon. And they never found the black boxes from any plane at the Pentagon. And they never, ever found those great, big, huge jet engines. What, do they just evaporate on impact? You really need to see second edition of Loose Change. I highly recommend it, and I don't make a penny from the sale of it. Go find a used copy on eBay or something, watch it. Now I want to take you back to Freedom Fest, where Michael Warnken, the intrepid Michael Warnken, went to interview people at Freedom Fest for On Second Thought. Here's one of the interviews.
Las Vegas at Freedom Fest. This is the last day. I am here with...
Hi, I'm Michelle Roberts.
And you are with?
Liberty Fund.
And can you tell us a little bit?
Yes, we are a nonprofit educational foundation out of Indianapolis. And what we do, we sponsor conferences and also publish books. And when I come to these shows, I bring our books. And basically what our company's mission is keep books in print that otherwise might go out of print. So economics, history, American history especially. We got a modern political thought titles over here and some natural law, things like that. So
who are some of the authors or some of the works that you have?
Let's see, we have, well, I don't have any up here because I sold them all.
That's excellent.
That's a good thing. But in our economics titles, we have Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek. I had some Bastiat. Yeah, Bastiat. And I still have some Seldons here. We have Israel Kirzner. Those would be our main economics titles.
You have any favorites?
Of the economics titles, there's some of that, they're economic thought, so some of it is very difficult reading. I mean, it's definitely, it's not.
Requires you to think?
Yeah, well, yeah, it requires you to think, but also it can be, you just can't read it by the pool. It's not exactly pool reading. But yes, I would say maybe the Hayek. I like the Hayek.
And you find that, so since we're at Freedom Fest, this is obviously a fairly libertarian, maybe quasi-conservative base. So, and is it fair to say that thinkers are here?
Yes, of course. Yeah, definitely. Very curious people that might not normally read, that are non-academic, but they are thirsty for it and they want to learn about it.
And this is to fuel their mind, obviously.
Yes.
You said you've been coming here for a while?
Yes. Our first attendance was 2010. And I've come, I think, every year except I wasn't here 2011, so I think every year since.
Have you enjoyed this conference?
Yes, I do enjoy it. Yeah, it's fun. It's a new market for us. I meet a lot of new people that aren't familiar with us, so that's always good.
Any events that you've enjoyed that you've been able to sneak off to, or?
Let's see. I went, as far as Freedom Fest, I went to a friend's screening. He had a movie screening, and then.
A lot of good movies.
Yeah. And
what was the one you saw?
Tank Man, Robert Anthony Peters. So I plugged him there. Okay. Yes, it's just a short film. And as far as Las Vegas, I just walk around usually.
Oh yeah, no, I'm talking about the conference.
Yeah, the conference. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Would you like to plug your organization?
Yes, I would. Actually, we have a great website. So libertyfund.org. In addition to being able to order our books there are also different resources, forums that you can visit. There's a Law and Liberty. There's an online Library of Liberty where a lot of digital.
A lot of free books.
Yes, free things, and an econ library, and I think I'm. Okay. Yeah. Oh, we have the new Adam Smith works too.
What's the website?
It's libertyfund.org.
I have been on it, and it does have a lot of good stuff. So anyway, well, I appreciate you doing the interview with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, back to you in the studio, Mr. Wagener. Yeah, this is Michael Warnken here at Freedom Fest for On Second Thought Television. This is lovely Las Vegas, and we're at the last day of the event, and I am here with...
Chalin Hudson.
Chalin Hudson. And who are you with?
I'm with myself today.
Okay, so you're a regular guy here on this.
Regular guy, like voluntary interactions more than coercion.
Oh, okay. So how long have you been at this convention so far?
You mean this one this year?
Yeah. Is this your first day?
Yeah, no, this is like my third day.
Okay.
This is my third day, but this is my first convention.
Oh, okay.
I've never been to Freedom Fest before.
Interesting. Are you? Would you call yourself a libertarian or?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of labels, but that it probably fits.
Tell us about your shirt right here. How about you?
So it was an epic meme. It was a hashtag Dink meme back in circa 2017, and it says dark humor. Let's see, what does it say? Can you read it for me so I don't say it?
So it's like food, not everyone gets it.
Stalin. So
I guess
memes turned into one of the best shirts.
So the idea is that you go to communism, this is what you get, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then, it was how long ago? Over 60 years ago.
And he came to power, pushed communism, and I guess it's fair to say bad things happened. Is that right?
Terrible things happened. People died. Shouldn't be funny, but occasionally you can have some dark humor about bad things, and then you can learn lessons from them.
So I probably fair to say that a dark meme because, memes are obviously to make fun of or at least point something out, and maybe some of our greater society might be tending towards that. Is that fair to say?
Sometimes. I think the great thing about memes is they're like these really bite-sized ways to share ideas. Right, they're just this really unique way to take a more complex idea but make it interesting to like the average person. Instead of some people are good with long form interviews. Like I like long form interviews. Less and less people are like enjoying the bite-sized news sources where you get 2 minutes.
I'm hearing that.
Yeah. So I think it's like there's something like the in-between people don't like. They like the really short stuff like the memes and the really long-form interviews like Joe Rogan or something like that.
I saw Joe Rogan doing a 2-hour podcast on a topic and getting into the nuts and bolts. Right?
Exactly. So I think like the in-between stuff is sort of dying. And if you're going to do it short, you got to make it entertaining, preferably funny. I like humor.
So as far as the convention go, you've been to a number of the panels, a number of the screenings. Do you anything that you've enjoyed?
I went to some of them. My favorite thing was the Glenn Beck Pendulette thing last night, and
that's the one where they both got on the floor.
Yeah, they both got on the floor. That was so hilarious. Glenn couldn't make the seat work for him, and I didn't blame him. The seats looked uncomfortable to me too. But you have to say this whenever you have opinions on anybody, but I don't agree with any of them 100%, right? Just to preface that. But yeah, I think generally they seem to be really genuinely good people. I just had Glenn sign his book for me, and he talked to me, and like he looks you in the eyes right whenever he talks to you for like 20 seconds. Not 100% right on anything, on everything from my perspective, but I think generally pointed north. And the number one thing that I really like about both of them is they care about like civility and treating people with respect, even if you don't agree with everything that all the issues. So.
Any other topics that are going on? Any other forums that you enjoyed?
I really like the Americans for Prosperity one. I think that they're a great organization. I think that the grassroots portion of what they do is going to, it helps continue the fight for freedom and economic freedom and policy change. I like some of the bigger ones. I didn't catch all of the mock trial, but it seemed like it was entertaining.
Yeah, the mock trial was about
the second half of it.
That was they had a trial here, and it was about gun rights.
Yeah. They were putting people on trial, basically, who were supporting the Second Amendment, I think.
Yeah, I believe that's what it was at. And it was kind of interesting to watch. So. Anything else? Have you had a good time?
I like most of the booths. There were a couple of people that were like really like a couple of the people that were selling stuff.
Wait, salesmen were pushy?
Which was kind of interesting. And of course, then it was on me as a libertarian to not say, I want the government to tell this person not to sell this thing to me. I had to have the fortitude to say, no, I'm not going to spend $250 on a little electroshock iPod thing, right? So I had to say no to that instead of buying on the impulse.
Looks like you made it.
I did. I survived.
Well, I appreciate the interview. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for the interview. And back to you, William, in the studio. Yeah, this is Michael Warnken here for On Second Thought at Freedom Fest here in Las Vegas. And this is the last day of the convention, and I am here with
Nicholas Sarwark, chairman of the Libertarian Party.
Okay, so this is a libertarian event, and this would be probably the right place for you to be.
It is. It's a mix of libertarians and conservatives. The libertarians obviously agree with us on a lot of things, and the conservatives agree with us on some things. So it's been a lot of interesting discussions, a lot of free exchange of ideas.
How's the convention gone so far?
It's been great. A lot of excitement, a lot of good panels. Pendulette was great last night. And a lot of chances to meet with people that sometimes I only see once a year because they come to this event. It's a chance to connect, get back together with people, find out what they've been up to, share ideas, and make plans for the future.
So you're the head of the actual party, and a lot of the people, vendors, and I guess think tanks as well who are here, I guess they would be sort of people who push the ideas, sort of the themes of the party, and then you're the actual party yourself.
Right. So there's a broad liberty movement, but there's only one political party that expresses that in electoral politics, and that's where the Libertarian Party's mission is. We don't try and do everything on purpose. We believe that, if you're a think tank pushing ideas, that's what you ought to do. We run candidates, we get people elected, we change public policy through the electoral politics, and that's an important thing for us to do as a broader movement. If the Libertarian Party didn't exist, many of our ideas would never be discussed in an election campaign. They would never be discussed on a debate stage. People wouldn't find out about them.
Yeah. Yesterday we had a interview with Mr. Hewitt, who I believe is holding one of the highest positions of anybody in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, he's one of the county supervisors for Riverside County, California, which is a huge county, has a massive budget, and his ability as a libertarian on a 5-member board allows him to shape the direction. It only takes one person on a board to steer the ship. And so he's been able to make coalitions with people who are Republicans or Democrats in order to get things done to make Riverside County better. Yeah. And that's what libertarians want to do when we get into elected office, is make it so that your life is more free, you're able to pursue happiness the way you want, and there's less government barriers to making a good life for yourself and your family.
Across the nation, how many libertarians are holding office?
You know, we have somewhere north of 187, 190 elected officials, but we're, even in 2019, a lot of people don't know there are elections happening this year. So we have over 200 candidates for public office, and we will probably add another 70 elected officials before the year is out.
I don't know if it's wrong for me to say, I saw you talking with Justin Amash over here. Is there any potential there?
You know, I think what Justin is doing by stepping away from the two old parties, he's recognizing the structural problem, which is that both of those parties have conspired together to give us a $22 trillion national debt, to put tariffs on the American people so that they can't pay for things, to keep our men and women going overseas to fight in foreign wars. And the only way you're going to get something different is to step away from a broken game between two warring tribes that don't care about the people, they only care about themselves.
One of my issues, by the nature of what I do, I'm pushing for smaller districts. California, we have 40 senators and 80 assemblymen and 40 million people. So each senator has 1 million people. Each assemblyman has 500,000. And I've often argued that third parties would succeed with smaller districts. New Hampshire has a number of libertarians. Do you have any thoughts on the issue, or is that?
I do have some thoughts on the issue. I'm actually moving to New Hampshire next month from Phoenix to live in the Free State.
So part of the Free State Project?
I'm part of the Free State Project. I was actually signer 461 back in June of 2002. And it's a great place to raise kids and a family. It's good quality of life. It's close to the East Coast, so for media appearances.
It is the East Coast.
Yeah, well, I mean, the larger cities like New York, Boston, and D.C., I can get down there quickly, more quickly than I can from across the country. But one of the things that makes it so good is the government is very representative there. So a lot of little towns where they have a town meeting culture and individual property owners go to that meeting and work through the budget. They have a general court with, I believe it's 400 representatives for a state of 1.3 million people. It's the third most representative body in the entire English-speaking world, and that makes government better. You know, we're libertarians. We want as little government as possible, but if you're able to just go and call up your representative or go have a coffee with them, that's a lot better than if you are one of 300,000 people that they represent. It's very easy for them to get disconnected from the people they're supposed to be representing.
Well, I appreciate that. Do you have anything you want to plug? You want to...
You know, what I would encourage everybody to do is, if you are tired of two old parties that are not addressing these major issues that would lead to a better life for your children and grandchildren, joining the Libertarian Party at lp.org, becoming a member, coming out as a big L libertarian, we create a larger group of people, we send a larger signal, and we let the old party politicians know that there's a group of people who are so passionate about having America be what it's supposed to be that they're going to step away from that red and blue tribal warfare. And we mean business. We're going to keep winning elections. We're going to keep coming out and fighting for the ideals that America is built on. So join us at lp.org.
Excellent. All right. Well, I appreciate the interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, back to you in the studio, Mr. William Wagener. Thank you. This is Michael Warnken here for On Second Thought Television. We are here in lovely Las Vegas, the last day of Freedom Fest, and I am here with...
Grace Morgan from Taxpayers Protection Alliance.
Excellent. So you're one of the people here at Freedom Fest talking about tax issues?
Yeah, I just, this is my first time at Freedom Fest, and I'm sort of getting the lay of the land and figuring out, you know, what sessions are the most beneficial for me to learn from, and sort of hearing from some new voices.
Well, there's so at this convention, there's a lot of breakout sessions that people go to, and they have all sorts of, I guess, panels. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are a lot of different main stage sessions, breakout panels, lunch sessions. So it's been nice to see a different mix of ideas.
And which ones have you gone to, and what's been interesting to you?
So I went to one yesterday. The Freedom Works, an organization in Washington, had a luncheon on income inequality, and I thought that was really interesting to see and to learn more about, how we hear a lot about income inequality in the United States and how, it makes the rich richer and the poor poorer, but in fact, the rich have actually benefited us a lot throughout history because we wouldn't have Apple, Nike, ESPN if it wasn't for $1 million donations from the rich. So actually, the income inequality isn't as bad as we think.
There does seem to be that dialogue in the greater public. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, perhaps Bernie Sanders.
Yes. Yeah, it's a heavily debated topic, especially in Washington right now.
So this is the other side from Bernie that you get to hear.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the side that you don't really see in the media, that the rich are actually benefiting a lot of people throughout our nation's history.
Or would you consider yourself of the libertarian or the Republican persuasion?
Yes, I'm probably lean more Republican than libertarian, but it's really nice to be here with a bunch of liberty lovers in Las Vegas. So it's nice to hear a lot about the libertarian mindset from leaders in the libertarian movement.
Been a good convention all around then.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. There was also another great panel yesterday with John Funge, Grover Norquist, and Candace Owens, which talked a lot about how we can communicate with others across the aisle and if a divided nation can actually stand together, which it seems like we're drifting more towards. Yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds like you've enjoyed yourself. Do you want to plug your organization?
Sure. I work at Taxpayers Protection Alliance in Washington, D.C., and we do a lot of tax policy, whether that's domestic tax policy, federal, local, state, international. And you can find more information at protectingtaxpayers.org.
Excellent.
Thanks
I appreciate
so much.
it. All right, well, thank you for having you here. Yep. All right. Back to the studio. Back to you, William Wagener. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Hi, my name is Brandon Morrison with On Second Thought, and I'm here with
Nick Vieser.
Thank you very much for coming out and speaking with us today. We're with On Second Thought, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. We've been covering the speakers, Glenn Beck and everyone else. Justin Amach is going to speak in a bit. How has your experience been? And is this your first Freedom Fest? Tell me a little bit about it.
It is my first Freedom Fest. It's been an unbelievable opportunity to meet with like-minded people. We are doing all of the media for Freedom Fest, so all of the content, our company, Liberty Link Media Group, is responsible for that. But just, the people not only that I get to meet, but also the people that I know already and I'm able to hang out with and converse with. It's just a great opportunity to meet like-minded people who understand and appreciate the principles of liberty.
Absolutely, and it's my first Freedom Fest as well, and so I'm actually very happy to meet you. I do follow you on Facebook. I see all of your videos that you post, and what is your drive whenever you're trying to present a message? Because you always have a humorous aspect to it, but it's always very cerebral. What's your thought process whenever you're approaching your positions online?
Well, I realize that I have to speak to people within the liberty movement, so I do keep it somewhat cerebral. I do try to, as much as possible, come from a place that they will relate to and understand. But on the other hand, I want to get out of the echo chamber. I want to talk to people who aren't libertarians already and who understand that something's wrong with the political discourse in this country. So what we do is we really try to we try to appeal and use humor. Historically, it seems like the left has the humor and entertainment thing on lockdown. We're really trying to penetrate that market a little bit.
Sure, and let me ask you a little bit about the echo chamber. I mean, a lot of the people here obviously are predisposed to the idea of freedom. How many minds do you think are being changed here? What do you think is the net positive from events like this?
How many minds are being changed here? I'm not sure so many minds are being changed here. But I do think that there are a lot of people here who are learning about certain aspects when it comes to freedom, right? We know that the right, the left, neither one of them have it right. Right? And I think that a lot of people, they do come to this conference, they have conservative principles, and they start to hear things that appeal to them that are a little outside of what makes them comfortable. And in that way, maybe some minds are being changed.
Sure, sure. Who's been your favorite speaker, or what's been your favorite event that you've been able to go to since you've been here?
Sure, I really liked Glenn Beck and Penn Jillette last night. That was great. I love watching Glenn Beck in general. He's very passionate about what he does. I don't always agree with him, but he's extremely passionate. And I love that. I love seeing the passion for liberty. My friend, and I'm not only a friend, but a fan of Justin Amash, and he's here. So I always love to see him.
Absolutely. Two more questions. What do you think that we can do to bridge the gaps on the nuances? Because it seems as libertarians are always fighting on the details, and the devil is in the details, but how can we come together to get the principles of liberty moving forward without having to worry about,
Stop worrying about nuance. Stop worrying about the details. I get so sick of that. If there's anything that bothers me, not only about the Libertarian Party, and I'll tell this to Nick Sarwark himself, but not only about the Libertarian Party, but about the libertarian movement as a whole, unfortunately, is we're too caught up in purity, nuance, all the other stuff. We need to move the ball forward. We need to move the line. As long as we can make a difference, as long as we can start to impact the way people think and the way people operate, we can actually make a difference.
So my one last question before giving you the opportunity to plug all of your things. The idea of representation is huge in my world, and we're talking about the idea that in California you have only 40 people in the Senate and 80 people in the Assembly. It's grossly misproportionate, especially when you have New Hampshire and whatnot. How much of winning the hearts and minds, moving that ball forward, do you think is shrinking the size of districts, increasing the number of representatives maybe in the House of Representatives?
I'm not sure. Yes, it could be a potential move, but I don't think that is the key to all of it. I think the key to all of it is getting liberty legislators elected and getting those people to actually impact policy. I am the executive producer not only for Liberty Link Media Group, but also Young Americans for Liberty. And Young Americans for Liberty and what they're doing at that organization, Operation Win at the Door, they are getting liberty legislators elected. Our goal is to have 250 state reps elected by 2024, 2022. Don't quote me on that, Cliff. But once that happens, those people will be the next Justin Amash, Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, and that is the way we're going to make a difference.
And just to speak about Young Americans for Liberty, I'm actually a legacy member, and I was a chapter chair. Awesome. So I'm glad that we were able to work on that. And one of the things that since you mentioned it, one of the things that I've tried to propose is that we need to focus more on the local committees, because that's where a lot of people's careers start. And in my case, I ran for Board of Trustees a couple years back for Santa Barbara City College.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for staying tuned. I know it's a long show, but I recommend you get that book from Sky Horse Publishing, Lbj and the JFK Assassination. Just go to skyhorse.com. I want to thank you all and salute you for tuning in for We the People. If you have an issue with anything local, state, or federal that you'd like me to bring up, investigate, call me, 805-928-1100. It's that easy, that easy. Now I'd like to show you something that you wouldn't have any knowledge of. This is a photo of me sailing on the tugboat just outside the pilot house, the John Roan the Five, and that's my father, who was captain. Doesn't look like a captain there, but he was captain on the John Roan the Five tugboat. Got me all over the Great Lakes, educated me in navigation, and this, believe it or not, is a picture of me as a Boy Scout in the Green Bay Press Cadet, just back from the 1960 Jamboree, getting ready to go to the 1964 National Boy Scout Jamboree. I believe we should all be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent towards God. Thanks for watching. Check some of my other videos. on my YouTube channel.